Hello everybody, Harvester here. This is a video to show you how to import maps into Balsa Model Flight Simulator. So I've got here the Balsa SDK project already set up with a little test scene, and we're going to set this up and get it exported into the game. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to do for setting up a scene is to go ahead and remove any camera components that you might have, because these scenes are loaded additively into the game. So we don't need the camera because the game already provides one. So just go ahead and delete that. The directional light here you can keep because this is effectively your sunlight. So this is the light that's going to affect everything in the scene. So the lighting setup in your scene is the lighting setup that will be used when the game loads it. So any lighting changes that you do here will be used in the game. So the next thing you want to do is to make sure that your scene will function with the floating origin system. So this is the system that moves the entire world back and forth to minimize numerical error in the simulation. So the main thing you want to be sure of is that your entire scene is able to be moved. So the easiest way to do this is to simply go ahead and create an empty game object here. We will call this scenery, or rather airfield. And this object, let's move it to the scene origin here. And this object is going to be the root of our entire scene. So everything that moves with the origin is going to be parented to this airfield. So we can basically select everything except for the directional light, of course, because that doesn't need to move, and just drag it under this object. So now they're parented here. Now the next thing is that we want to add a float with origin component to this object. So now this object is ready to be called upon by the game to move as needed and basically displace the entire scene based on what the floating origin system needs. And you can verify that this is working well by just moving it around here, and make sure that all of your objects are able to actually move. Now the next thing is to make sure that your scene objects are all in the right layer. So we want to have generally most of everything in the scenery layer here. The add-on project in the SDK already comes pre-configured with all the game layers, and you want to make sure that all your scenery objects live in the scenery layer. So we can change everything to the scenery layer, with the exception actually of the trees here that we want to put in the vegetation layer. So we can just do this after having changed everybody, and that should make sure that all of our tree objects are in the vegetation layer, and the rest of everything is in the scenery layer. And the scenery far layer, we have this distance scenery meshes here. We can move this to the scenery far layer. This is a layer that doesn't have collision enabled, so it's just better suited for distant objects that you're not likely to reach. So now everything should be correctly configured in all layers, and we should be ready to continue. Now, there's a couple of other things that we need to add to the scene to make this into a workable map in the game. So the first of these is spawn locations. So I've already got a number of spawn points defined here, and they're just randomly placed around the map. And these are just basically points that are used to define where players are allowed to spawn when they join the game. To mark an object as being a spawn point, what you want to do is to add an SCN spawn point component to them. And you can see that now that shows them with a little gizmo. If you focus closely on one, you will see that it's also got a little nubbin here that will point to the rotation in which the player will spawn at this point. That's also the Z-axis of the transform. So you can just rotate this as you want, and this will position the player at this location looking towards the Z-axis. Another thing we probably want to do is to define a couple of menu viewpoints for this map. Because if you remember, Balsa loads a map when it first starts in the main menu, and your map can be used as a menu background as well. And to do that, we just need to create some extra game objects and set them up to be our menu spawn point locations. So let's just create an empty game object here to be our menu viewpoint. And this is just going to be a container. So we'll reset this to the scene origin and we'll create an empty child object here. We'll call this just POV 0, I guess. It doesn't need to be anything. And we'll just attach the SCN menu viewpoint controller to this. And you can see that it's got a field for the workshop just in case you want to place a viewpoint inside the workshop on this map. If you do that and link the workshop here, it will make sure that the workshop interior is loaded if that menu viewpoint is used. So we can position this, and the easiest way to position these viewpoints is to just literally frame the view like so in the scene editor, then come out here to game object and choose the align with view option. And that will put your game object exactly where the view was. So let's go ahead and create a new one, maybe like out here, kind of with the plane and everything. Yeah, that looks like a good viewpoint. So we just like create an empty game object here, POV1, game object, align with view, and add the controller to it. And that's all there is to it. And of course, just make sure that this object is also parented to the airfield so that it will float with the origin. Otherwise, weirdness may happen. And that's it for the menu viewpoints. Now, there are other things you can add to the map, such as fast travel locations and the workshop building and so on. But in the interest of keeping this tutorial as short as possible, we are going to skip all that and just go straight ahead to exporting this and getting this to work in the game. We've already got everything that we need to export and actually see this map in game, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, to get this map exported, what you need is to open the Asset Bundle browser window. And this will let you generate the asset bundles that the game uses to load all of its add-on content. You can see here that the SDK example project already has a few of these asset bundles set up, and these are defined by the assets that are in the parts setup scene. And we're not using these right now, so you can actually go ahead and delete these. And that doesn't remove any assets from the project. It has just deconfigured those assets as being part of these bundles. And you don't need to do this, but the asset bundle browser will build all of the asset bundles that are configured in it. So it's probably just a good idea to not build assets that you don't need to. What we want is to include the scene that we just made and all the assets that come with it. And it's as simple as dropping this into here. And you can see that this has already created a scene bundle, which corresponds to the scene that we're making. And all of its dependency assets like textures, materials, meshes, prefabs, all of it is included here. So that's pretty much all you need to do to configure your scenery for export. So next we change over to the build tab here. And you want to make sure that you're targeting standalone Windows 64. And we can configure our output path to wherever we want to have the asset bundles generated. So now would be a good time to look at how to configure your mod folder. So let's create our mod folder. This is the SDK folder that we downloaded. We can just create a new folder here called Airfield Mod. And this will be our mod folder. Now back here, we can browse to this new folder we've created. And that is here. And this will now be our build output folder. There we go. You also want to copy this. This is for later, but you also want to copy this and come up here in Floating Origin Interactive, Balsa Asset Bundle Tools, and this window will pop out. And it's got this output folder here, and this needs to be configured with the same path that you're outputting to. So just make sure that those two fields are set up and that they match. And we should be good to go. So now let's just make sure that everything is set up right. We actually don't need compression here, so just change that to no compression so it loads faster. And hit build. That will start the build process, and it will take a while. I'll just speed this part up for you. All right, and it's done. Now, if we go have a look at our mod folder here, you can see that the asset bundle browser has generated our asset bundle files and a couple of manifest files. And you can see that these are our asset bundles, and they don't have an extension on them. And what the game wants is the so-called FOB files, which are our bundles. And to do that, we come back here to our asset bundle tools, and you can just hit post-process asset bundles in the output folder. So this is why they need to match. And that's it. Now, if you go back here, you can see that they've been renamed with the FOB files. It's also updated the manifest files with what it needed to do. And this is now ready to be loaded by the game. So the next thing we need to do is to create the modcfg file, which contains all the information about the assets our mod has. So modcfg files are like an index to everything your mod contains. They are what tell the game what assets to load, and they also contain definitions for sceneries, plugins, and everything else that the mod needs. And these are just simple text files, so we can go ahead and just create them here, like so. And we will call this our airfield mod, remember, modcfg extension. Yes. And that is our modcfg. Windows might complain, so I might have to associate this with a text editor. I'm going to use Notepad++ here, but you can just use Notepad if that's what you have. And here we are in Notepad++, and we can start writing out our modcfg. And of course, we don't want to write this out from scratch. We can use the one provided in the examples folder of the SDK as our starting point and just tweak that. So we have the Balsa plugins as mod folder, and it comes with a modcfg here that we can use. So back here in Notepad, we will just copy all this stuff and paste it here and start modifying. So as our title, let's call this airfield. We can leave these unchanged. I guess, well, I guess this is version 0.1 of this mod. We don't have any plugins and we don't have any parts. We will cover that later. What we want here is to add a new scenery definition in this part of the modcfg, which will tell the game that we have a map that we want to load. And for this, we will copy the definition that the game has in its own scenery definitions. So we can find that in the game's install directory, inside add-ons, base game, in the scenery modcfg file. So here we have a bunch of scenery definitions. We will just copy one of these and use it in our mod. So this map is called airfield, creatively enough. We can leave the description empty. The FOB name is the name that we exported our asset bundle as, and that is called SCN Airfield. So that's what we want to call that here. And AB file path is the path in which the game can find the FOB file, and we will drop our mod folder in the add-ons path of the game, and we want it to find the SCN Airfield FOB file that lives in there. The main scene field points to your Unity project itself. It is telling the game where to find the scene file, and this is essentially the path of this asset here. So what you want to do is to just right click here and copy path, then back here in Notepad, we can just paste that here. This might seem redundant if you only have one scene in your project, but It is technically possible to load additional scenes into the same map, or even have multiple scenes in the same asset bundle. So this is what the main scene path is for. Next, we want to provide a couple of images for the game to display for this map. One of them is the banner image here, and the other one is the poster image that is used in the career workshop scenery selector. And the easiest way to do that is to just come back here, maximize the window, and choose a nice perspective, and hit Windows Shift S and capture a screenshot. And then save that as our image. And we'll go ahead and save that in our mod folder as well. Call that banner image. I do want to make sure that this image has 1534 pixels by 720 pixels in dimensions. So you will probably need to open it up with Paint or Photoshop. We'll use Photoshop here and just crop it to that size. So back here in Photoshop, we just need to crop this to be 1534 pixels. 1533 is probably good enough, by 720. Hit enter, save the file, and it will bug us about wanting to save PSD. We don't want to, we just want to save the PNG. Yes, overwrite, and that is done. Now back in the modcfg file, we want to make sure we have this image path set up right. And remember that these are relative to the add-ons folder in the games. Next up is the poster image path, and we'll do basically the same thing. The only thing is that the pixel dimensions for this one are 453 by 512. So this is kind of a portrait shot. Grab it from here, and this is more or less the aspect ratio that we want. So I've already saved it as our poster image PNG. So back in Photoshop, to crop it, one thing you can do is to, in the crop tool, change this to resolution. And here you can type out the pixel resolution that you want. And in our case, we want 453 by 512 pixels. And there we go. And if you don't get this exactly right, it's not the end of the world. The game is probably just going to squash your image a little bit, and it's most likely going to be fine. Now finally, the last image here is for a map, but we're going to cover that in a video later. So for now, you can just delete this, and we'll go without a map for now. The rest here is for career mode. So here you can define how much this map is going to cost you in career, how much XP it takes to unlock, whether it's available in career mode at all, and if you start available with it, but we'll just leave this as is for now. Now finally, we are almost ready to install this into the game. There's one last step, and this is so that the game knows how to manage your mod. We want to go here into the Balsa Works uploader and launch the uploader tool, and this will create a mod export CFG file, which is what allows the game to manage the mod and later publish it to the Steam Workshop. So all you need to do is drop it here into the command prompt and hit enter, and that will have created automatically a mod export CFG file inside the mod folder. And if we open that, you can see here that it's already been initialized with data that we wrote in our mod CFG file. Now to get our mod into the game, all we need to do now is drag our mod folder and drop it into the mods folder of the game. Now we could drop it into add-ons. Remember that we wrote all of those paths relative to add-ons, but that would cause you to not be able to disable this mod, and then that would lead to trouble later on if you're trying to join multiplayer. So we'll drop it into mods instead, and that will require us to afterwards enable the mod in the game settings. So let's now launch the game. Now, if we've done everything right, you should not be able to see the map here just yet, because it's still disabled and it needs to be enabled here. And there we go, our airfield map is here and disabled, so we just need to enable it. It requires a restart, hit accept, and restart the game. And now you can see that it's actually already loaded, our airfield map, but something's weird with it. Let's head into flight with it, and we'll try to figure out what's going on. So yeah, we can see here that the terrain seems fine, but some of the buildings and the trees don't seem to be in the correct position. And you can see that if we walk around a bit, you can see that those buildings have shifted the moment we had an origin shift. So this is something that I wanted to illustrate because it's a very common cause of this kind of trouble, and I wanted to show what can happen and how you can fix it. So let's go back to the scene project now, and we'll get this sorted out. Okay, we're back here in our project, and let's check these objects and see why they're not moving around as they should. And if we select the hangar here, you can see that this is marked static. And this is the problem. Like, when an object is marked static like this, Unity assumes that it's not going to move, and we can't have that. So we need to clear this flag, but you can see that this flag is set on many other objects. So the easiest way to make sure that none of them are marked as static is to come here, click the static flag in the airfield parent, and hit yes, change children. And that has now set all of our objects as static, which is entirely not all we want. But we can click it again, change children again, and now this has unset the static flag in all child objects of the airfield. So now if we select the hangar again, you can see that it's no longer marked as static. So we'll go ahead and save, bring back the asset bundle browser, and rebuild our scene. That's done, and same as before, don't forget to come back here, Balsa asset bundle tools, and hit post-process the asset bundles. And if we come here and have a look at our mod again, we should see that it's updated the airfield and airfield mod fab files, and we should be ready to try again. And same as before, just drop our mod folder into mods again, replace all the files, and let's launch the game once more and see if that's fixed it. And since we've already enabled the mod last time, we shouldn't have to do that again. There we go. And now we have our airfield map correctly configured and ready to use. And that's it, really. That's the basics to creating and exporting a map into Balsa. Of course, there's more that we haven't covered yet, like defining fast travel locations, setting up the map, and a bunch of other stuff. But we'll cover those in future videos. For now, hopefully this gives you enough information to get started with your mod maps, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Cheers.